County prosecutor who will be, of course, prosecuting the Karmelo Anthony case. And it doesn't look too good for him. It seems that he's been enthralled in some type of a scandal where multiple female employees in his office are calling him out, basically saying that he's SA'd them in some type of way.
You wake up to the shocking news that federal agents have placed Karmelo Anthony's parents under arrest after uncovering what prosecutors are calling a meticulously planned assassination scheme. The figure at the center of the allegations is staggering: a $230,000 payout allegedly funneled toward a contracted killer. According to investigators, this wasn't some impulsive act. It was a calculated operation involving multiple financial transfers, encrypted communications, and late-night meetings that painted a chilling picture of premeditation. Court documents detail how law enforcement pieced the scheme together. Investigators tracked unusual withdrawals, with $50,000 increments repeatedly being moved through different accounts before finally consolidating into the $230,000 sum. Prosecutors allege this money was directed to an intermediary with direct connections to the individual hired to carry out the attempt. Surveillance footage, seized text messages, and banking logs reportedly provide a timeline that points to weeks of preparation leading up to the arrest. When the arrests were made, witnesses say the atmosphere was tense. Neighbors described seeing federal SUVs lining the block, agents in tactical gear moving quickly and decisively. They didn't hesitate. Doors were kicked in, papers scattered everywhere, one witness recalled. Inside the residence, officers reportedly seized electronic devices, cash records, and ledgers believed to show coded notations tied to the payments. The discovery of these materials, prosecutors claim, dismantles any argument of innocence and strengthens the state's case. Now, the courtroom prepares for what's certain to be a high-profile battle. Legal experts are already suggesting that the combination of money trails and eyewitness accounts makes the charges nearly impossible to fight. But defense attorneys are expected to argue that the funds had nothing to do with violence, framing the allegations as circumstantial and inflated. The tension in the legal community is thick, as every new revelation adds fuel to the fire. And now people are wondering, how far would someone go to cover their tracks when hundreds of thousands of dollars are involved in a case this serious? Would you believe the defense's claim of innocent transactions? Or do you see the $230,000 payment as undeniable proof of intent? You're sitting inside the packed courtroom as the prosecution lays out its opening salvo, their voice steady but cutting as they introduce the $230,000 figure. On a large projection screen behind them, a sequence of bank statements appears, line after line of withdrawals, transfers, and coded payments. Jurors lean forward, studying the numbers, the tension mounting with each document revealed. The prosecutor tells the jury, this was not a coincidence. This was not an accident. This was payment for blood. The defense quickly objects, claiming the statements are being dramatized without context. But the judge allows the evidence to stand. Each transaction is highlighted, and soon the jury sees the progression, a steady funneling of funds, building toward one purpose. The prosecution then connects these payments to phone records showing late-night calls between Karmelo Anthony's parents and a suspected intermediary, someone prosecutors allege was the link to the contracted killer. The air in the courtroom grows heavier as testimony begins. A financial analyst brought in by investigators explains how these unusual movements raised red flags, prompting the deeper probe that eventually unraveled the alleged plot. The money trail tells a story, the analyst states, and it is a story of planning, preparation, and intent. Across the aisle, Karmelo's parents sit stiffly, faces frozen, barely glancing at one another as their attorneys scribble notes furiously. Reporters describe the silence in the room as almost suffocating. Not a cough, not a whisper, just the echo of the analyst's voice as the $230,000 sum is repeated again and again. Observers later admit it felt like the number itself was on trial, a figure too specific, too deliberate, to be brushed aside. Yet despite the weight of the prosecution's claims, the defense hints that they will present an entirely different narrative, one that reframes these payments as legitimate and unrelated to violence. And now the question lingers. Will the jury see the $230,000 as a smoking gun? Or can the defense dismantle the prosecution's story before it's too late? You hear the bailiff call the next witness, and the tension sharpens immediately. A former associate of the Anthony family takes the stand, a man who once described himself as a close confidant. The courtroom watches as he avoids eye contact with Karmelo's parents, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. The prosecutor wastes no time. Did they ever discuss paying someone to carry out violent acts on their behalf? The witness exhales heavily, then nods. Yes, they told me it needed to be handled quietly, and they were willing to pay. Gasps ripple through the gallery. The jurors keep their eyes locked on the witness, pens scratching against paper as they try to absorb every word. He goes further, alleging that in late-night conversations, there were specific mentions of getting rid of problems and making sure Austin Metcalf's family couldn't push back anymore. These claims directly link the Anthony parents' financial transactions to a motive, silencing voices tied to the original stabbing that shook the community. Defense attorneys spring up, hammering the witness with questions meant to dismantle his credibility. Weren't you facing charges of your own at the time you came forward? One lawyer presses. The witness admits he was, but insists that his decision to testify was not a bargaining chip. This is the truth. I was there, I heard it, and I knew something terrible was coming if no one spoke up. Observers note how the parents react, or rather, how they don't. They remain eerily still, almost defiant in their composure. Some reporters describe it as a mask of control, others as an admission of defeat. One juror can't stop glancing back and forth between the witness and the accused, as if weighing every movement. Outside the courthouse, protesters chant louder than ever. Some demand justice for Austin Metcalf's family, holding signs that read, "Blood paid for," and "Money can't buy innocence." Others stand firm in their belief that the Anthony parents are being scapegoated, their chants calling this entire trial a federal witch hunt. And now the question grows more pressing. When the people closest to them start speaking out, how much credibility will the jury give to insiders who claim to know the truth? You hear the shuffle of papers as the defense team rises, their lead attorney adjusting his glasses before facing the jury. His voice is firm, almost rehearsed. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've heard is not truth. It's desperation. Witnesses who have every reason to lie are shaping narratives to save themselves. He points toward the stand, calling into question the motivations of the so-called close confidant. The defense insists the testimony is nothing more than a strategy for leniency in unrelated cases. They pivot quickly to the $230,000 withdrawal, arguably the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. The attorney explains it as a business investment gone wrong, suggesting the funds were tied to a failed real estate venture, not an assassination plot. He even produces partial documentation showing the parents wiring money into shell companies. The implication? These weren't payments to a hitman, but reckless financial decisions that prosecutors are twisting into something darker. Jurors sit stiffly, processing every slide the defense flashes on the projector. One juror leans forward, squinting at a bank record enlarged on the screen, while another shakes her head, unconvinced. The attorney capitalizes on these reactions, hammering the point. Correlation does not mean causation. Bad bookkeeping doesn't equal murder. Reporters in the press row tap frantically on laptops, some describing the defense's counter as aggressive but calculated. Others note how little emotional weight it carries compared to the chilling testimonies already heard. Meanwhile, Karmelo's parents sit with hands folded neatly in their laps, nodding occasionally as their attorney argues for their innocence. Outside, crowds split more sharply than ever. Protesters scream about blood money, while others defend the parents as victims of financial profiling. Social media hashtags explode, with # show the proof, trending alongside # justice for Metcalf. And now the tension shifts. If the defense manages to blur the line between financial recklessness and criminal intent, will the jury start questioning whether the prosecution has truly tied this money to violence, or is it just smoke and mirrors? You're sitting in the courtroom when the prosecutor suddenly asks the judge for permission to play a piece of evidence that hasn't yet been shown to the public. The lights dim, a projector flickers on, and grainy surveillance footage appears on the screen. The timestamp places it just days before the attempted hit. In the video, a man identified as the alleged hitman is seen entering a parking garage, only moments later meeting with a figure prosecutors claim is Karmelo Anthony's father. The jurors' eyes widen as the clip shows a quick exchange, an envelope passing from one hand to another. Though the footage is blurry, prosecutors argue it contains the exact cash that was withdrawn from the couple's account. "This isn't a business deal," the prosecutor says, his voice echoing. "This is payment for murder." The room falls completely silent, the weight of the accusation hanging heavy in the air. To strengthen the point, the prosecution unveils a series of text messages recovered from the alleged hitman's phone. One reads, "Funds cleared, job expected by Sunday." Another message, prosecutors claim, was sent from a burner phone linked back to the parents, stating, "No loose ends." gasps ripple through the gallery as these words appear in bold letters across the projector screen. Karmelo's parents sit motionless, their faces pale under the harsh courtroom lights. His mother lowers her head, clasping her hands tightly, while his father maintains a rigid stare toward the judge, refusing to glance at the evidence being displayed. Reporters whisper to one another, already predicting headlines that will dominate the evening news. The defense quickly objects, calling the evidence misinterpreted and claiming the messages could have been fabricated or taken out of context. But the damage has been done. Jurors exchange looks, some visibly shaken by what they've just seen. And now, with evidence stacking higher and higher, the looming question grows louder both inside and outside the courtroom. If the money, the video, and the messages all align, how much longer can the parents deny their role before the jury decides their fate? You step outside the courthouse, and the sound hits you before you see the crowd. Dozens of protesters line the steps, holding signs that read, "Justice for Austin Metcalf" and "Blood money won't hide the truth." Chants echo off the concrete walls, demanding accountability for what many are calling one of the most disturbing betrayals tied to the case. Police form a barricade, keeping tensions from spilling into chaos as cameras capture every moment. The Metcalf family emerges shortly after, flanked by their legal team. Austin's mother clutches a framed photo of her son, tears rolling down her cheeks as she pauses in front of the reporters. Her voice shakes, but the message is firm. No amount of money, no scheme, no cover-up will ever bring our son back, but justice will. The statement quickly spreads online, drawing sympathy and outrage from across the country. On social media, hashtags explode. #Justice for Austin, #Blood on their hands, and #Anthony cover-up trend within hours. Clips of the alleged surveillance footage circulate on Twitter, dissected frame by commentators and armchair detectives. Some users argue the evidence is irrefutable. Others question whether the defense's claim of fabricated texts could hold weight. Either way, the internet is buzzing with speculation, creating an even harsher spotlight on the Anthony family. Meanwhile, sponsors and former allies begin quietly distancing themselves. A charity once partnered with the family removes their names from its website. Local businesses close to the Anthonys issue statements condemning the accusations. The fallout is spreading quickly, with every headline carrying the same grim undertone. The case is no longer just about Karmelo, it's about his entire family legacy. And now the question on everyone's mind grows louder. If the public is already convinced of their guilt, can the parents possibly survive a trial without becoming symbols of corruption and betrayal in front of the jury? You sit in the courtroom as the final motions unfold, the atmosphere charged with tension that seems to thicken with every passing second. The judge enters, his gavel striking with a sharp crack that silences the room instantly. The Anthony parents are led in by marshals, their faces pale and rigid. Murmurs ripple across the gallery as whispers of the $230,000 payment hang heavy in the air. Prosecutors rise, laying out their final statement with chilling precision. This was no accident. This was planned, organized, and executed with intent. The paper trail doesn't lie. A projector flashes images of wire transfers, ATM withdrawals, and text exchanges that investigators claim reveal the family's direct involvement in hiring the killer. Each new piece of evidence draws gasps from the crowd, fueling the storm already raging outside the courthouse. The defense fights back, insisting the documents are misinterpreted and that the Anthonys are victims of a smear campaign, but their words feel drowned out by the weight of what has already been shown. Karmelo himself sits in the back, eyes fixed downward, refusing to meet the stares of reporters or the Metcalf family. Then comes the moment no one expected. The judge announces that both parents will remain in custody without bail, citing the severity of the charges and the risk of further tampering with evidence. The courtroom erupts, some in applause, others in shouts of disbelief. Marshals escort the Anthonys away, while outside the chants of protesters roar louder, echoing like a verdict before the trial has even begun. And as the gavel falls one last time for the day, the question lingers. With money, power, and influence failing to shield them, are we witnessing the beginning of their downfall, or just the opening act of an even darker revelation still to come?